people can barely handle Lopa for some reason. It's complicated. And Sircar is like, it's spelled Sircar, but it's pronounced Sharkar. So I was like, I gotta make it easy for people out here. So I'm Lopa Sircar. My mom is Archana Dada. Dotto is how you pronounce her last name. And my first ancestor in arrivals was my grandfather, my mother's father, Mohendranath Dutt. And my ancestor that I'm working with now is my Dida, my grandmother. Her name is Jarubela Dotto, was Dotto when she was married, but Jarubela Sharkar. It's very long and complicated. I'm a settler, well, a first-generation Canadian born here. My parents met in Saskatoon. My dad is from the northern, like north of Calcutta, Bihar, I think, maybe. He was from there. My mother was born in Kolkata, Calcutta. But both my grandparents, they're actually from what is now Bangladesh. So they didn't come at the mass migration, which is, at the time, it was one of the largest ones in recorded history that nobody talks about because it's us. They came earlier. My grandfather came because he was a freedom fighter, and he started a publishing company. He put out a lot of the underground literature that helped fuel the drive for Indian independence. And my grandmother, they're both from a place called Borishal in West Bengal. My grandmother was sent to Kolkata when she was quite young to go to school. She was raised in a St. Margaret's. She was very proper British school. But they met and were married in the 30s in Calcutta. So I've always said that I'm from Calcutta, my parents are from Calcutta, but I've only recently realized that they also moved. And my mother moved. But at the time when they moved, Bengal was all one, prior to partition. And when I did the work for my grandfather, the arrivals process for my grandfather, he, in his book, in his memoirs, wrote, if I had known when I fought for Indian freedom that I would need a visa to go home, I don't know how I would have fought if I had known that. So it's a journey arriving into truths. And I don't think I would even know to listen to my wondering about that if I hadn't done this work. That's where I'm from, my origins. I just made a tree. I've never done that before. I have always been a theater maker. So as an actor, I've written a few little things here and there. I think I'm entering into a writing phase, like a proper writing phase, without the like limitation or obligation of creating theater. I'm moving more into a space of creation in an installation sort of a way. So I feel like that's where my next journey is. I'm beginning to learn to draw, and I'm beginning to come back to the theater in the arrivals way. So not the theater, like our kind of way of working in a decolonized space where process is valued as much as a product. I met Diane. I've been trying to leave theater for a very long time. My whole life that I was in it, I was trying to leave it because I have a money monster, and I was like, they're not compatible. My career choice and my money monster, they have a mistrust of one another, I think. But I had left the theater. I tried to leave it twice, had left for 4 years, went into publishing, which is like, if you want to be in a fresh hell with your money monster, worse than theater, go into Canadian publishing in the 2000s. So I did that for a while, and I was like, look, if I'm going to be broke, and that's how life will be, I should find a way to be a little happier while being broke. So I thought I will go to Canada's National Voice Intensive, which is now the Canadian Moving Voice Institute, I think. And I met Diane there. And I remember it was very private, this like calling I had to find out about, initially it was my grandmother actually, but she was not picking up the phone. My grandfather was, but it was very private. I was part of a very standard Canadian theater training upbringing. So it was like a top secret to even like whisper that I had a curiosity about somebody in my past, because why is my story relevant? Nobody cares, right? So I don't know what compelled me except the ancestors to share that with Diane. And Diane was like, well, I'm working on a thing. And so we began to explore her work with Heather Hermant's work, my work, and that's how it began. And I'm still unfurling things about that. That was 2005 that we met. It's almost 20 years. And I'm still gaining new insights, and my scope, I think, and capacity to find breath space for others and myself and the selves behind, the folks behind, keeps getting wider and wider, and it gives me so much joy. Oh, and I'm also a voice coach. I should have said that, my artistic practice. I'm a voice coach. And I'm a Rolfer. That's also my artistic, that's how I approach Rolfing. It's a kind of manipulation that you do with the fascia of the body, and I approach them all through the same lens of wholeness, helping, inviting wholeness in the folks that I'm working with and in myself. And I don't think the question of wholeness would have ever occurred to me as part of a creative process and as part of a source had I not done Arrival's work. Legacy voice to me is an evolving process. I know that the opportunity to explore it came up with Diane at the Moving Voice Institute, at the Moving Voice Institute. I was lucky enough one day, I happened to be in Toronto. Maybe I still lived there at the time, I can't remember. I feel like I was very fortunate to be able to come in to witness Diane work with the participants of that, of the 3-week vocal adventure. And it is Shakespeare, you know, it's like big. And I was so excited, and I felt such relief to witness. She was teaching calls and responses. She was teaching movement. I think there might have been shaking of the bones prior, maybe not in the session that I didn't see that part. But what I saw is when we can be when these kids have permission to be more of who they are in this moment, which necessarily means in the future and in the past, when they can galvanize those big words like Diane's approach made it so that those young people had to work less hard to find the story of that size, those words, that rhythm. And it became theirs, and it became that the storytelling of that became a communal activity with the folks that were in the group. And that was not how I've experienced most of my theater training. So I was like that. So when Diane asked me to help out, I'm constantly trying to re-evolve and think of other ways to be in my body with the voice. I think it's breathe, and then we feel. And based on what we feel, that's when we think. And then the last thing that happens is the speaking. And Diane's work and how we approach legacy voices, we spend time on those first three so that the speaking becomes quite effortless. And I'm a big fan of an authentic voice. It doesn't have to be a beautiful voice. It doesn't have to be a resonant necessarily voice. It has to resound with truth in the moment. And so when we began with the Arrival's legacy voice, I found myself being very interested in allowing vocal silence to be a part of that process. Because then when things become quiet, one can vibrate the impulse to sound. So a lot of legacy voice for a long period was about honoring. In my physical theater training work, we have what's called a silent partner, and this kind of Grotowski-Chaikin kind of basis of physical theater training that I have, silent partner. So a silent partner is a person who has so much to say but doesn't feel they can speak. And I think for me anyway, one of the realities of being given the opportunity to take up space and to speak is one would think like, oh, I never got that chance. Now I got it, blah, but that's not what happens. The body has a whole bunch of other experiences first. So I wanted to give space for that, and I feel like we're doing that, and we're bringing voice and sound and vibration back in, and there seems to be such an appreciation and an honoring of sound that is truthful, and so non-performative, and that's where I am curious, and I want to keep taking legacy voice work. And the legacy voice work for me is intimately tied, and it's like a way in to do the Arrivals process. In my mind, I would love to also see it like the legacy voice is also the voice of the writer, the voice of the artist that comes from vibrating in this decolonized way. That's a hope that I want to see evolve, yeah. I think this is essential work, actually, for all artists, especially folks who don't look out into our Western world that we live in and see monikers of where they're from, because it gives space for story in a way that is like generous, but also like internally generous. Like I I am becoming more, it helps me to find belonging inside me instead of looking for belonging outside. And it helps me trust that that belonging inside me helps other people to belong. So in the larger scope, I mean, I'm actually hoping that I get a grant to explore how a version of this work can be applied to a wider audience. Because I think it should, actually, I say that mindfully, it should be applied. I mean, we live in extremely disembodied times. I think we live in times that can at first glance seem extremely disempowering. And I think of, in the airplane, you've got to put your own mask on and then you help other people. I think this work invites us to put our own mask on. And then not only does it create the space to help other people because your fuel is there, you have access to your air, so you can help other people, but it frees up the space to love those people. And I think the thing about breathing, feeling, is that creating opportunities in that feeling to allow more and more and more feelings to exist. Hopefully not all at the same time, but sometimes maybe. That act for the ancestors and for ourselves is corrective. It changes the path of what we do next. So it's deeply, profoundly healing. And when we are healed, I'm pretty sure that we're here to love. Everything else is a distraction. And all the distractions are opportunities. So it sucks at the moment, but it's not, like, this is the journey. In Hinduism, I was born Hindu, but I don't practice it so much. But there's ideas of, there's 4 times. They last hundreds of thousands of years, so maybe there's 4 periods. We're in the darkest one right now. We're not even halfway through. But in the story lands of the culture that lives in my blood, these are cycles that continue and continue and continue. So that darkness before the dawn, well, we have to have that. This is a way through little lights. Okay, good.
Microphone for me.